Welcome to Ignore the Bell, the Tarantino episode.
What?
Welcome to Ignore the Bell, the Tarantino episode.
What?
Say what again? I dare you. I double dare you.
What? What?
What country are you from?
What?
Do they speak English in what?
What?
That was Pulp Fiction, ladies and gentlemen. Not a good version of Pulp Fiction, but that was a reference to Pulp Fiction. So again, we are talking Tarantino films. I'm Nathan.
And I'm Tyler.
And we do have a sponsor for today's episode, right?
Yes. Yeah, I believe we do. Yeah.
So our sponsor for today is The F Word. Ignore the Bell is brought to you by The F Word, Tarantino's second favorite curse word. And we all know what the first one is, but I am not having my show sponsored by that one.
Yes, but very, very thankful to The F Word for sponsoring this
Oh,
episode.
so grateful. Please go out there and buy it. Use it. Use it liberally.
Can
This is
you
gonna be
buy
a
it?
I don't. This is gonna be a great episode. All right, folks, enjoy.
Oh man, I wish this discussion could go on forever.
Ignore the bell. We're gonna keep going, people.
All right, so this week we are talking about Quentin Tarantino movies. I think that what we're going to do is we're going to basically do an overview of his film career and then talk about some of the themes and trends that we've noticed and the direction he's going in the future.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one thing that you can't get away from when talking about Quentin Tarantino is his belief that he will only make 10 films because he only has 10 films in him.
That's the big thing, and I think let's just jump right into that because I think that's the most interesting thing about Tarantino. He's made it this thing, but he would have been still one of the most interesting filmmakers in like the contemporary era, even if he didn't say that. But then
Right,
he says that, and he's really been playing this up. I mean, like with the Hateful Eight, really
yeah,
playing up the eight aspect
yeah.
of it. And then what's the next one called? A Hollywood Story? Is that
No,
right?
it is Once Upon a Time, in Hollywood.
Okay, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Um, okay, so yeah, I do want to talk about this idea that he's only going to make 10 films and his rationale behind this. But let me first go over the actual films so far.
Yeah.
So in 1992, then he directed Reservoir Dogs. And then in 94, it was Pulp Fiction. In 97, Jackie Brown. In 2003, it was Kill Bill Volume 1. And then 2004, it was Kill Bill Volume 2.
Which should be
Uh,
clarified. He considers that to be one film.
yes, it's one film. He filmed them together, didn't he? Didn't he
Yeah,
film? Okay. Like he filmed them all at
but
the same time. There was no gap, right?
right, but the studio didn't want him to release it as one film because then they wouldn't be able to have as many showings in a day because
Gotcha.
of how long it would be. Yeah.
Right, right. And then Death Proof in 2007. That was the double feature that he did with Robert Rodriguez. Am I getting that right?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay. And then 2009, Inglorious Bastards.
Hmm.
And then 2012, Django Unchained. And then 2015, The Hateful Eight. And then this year, we are going to get Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yep, and that will be his ninth film. And
Yeah. Do you know what the release
supposedly,
date is? Do
uh, it's very soon. I want to say it's sometime in June.
Okay.
Yeah, so a couple months away from when we're recording this.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there you go. So we're up to 9 then with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Right.
So
And
yeah,
he also is potentially going to be making a Star Trek film, which okay.
right. Because wouldn't that Star Trek film then be the last one that he does?
Yeah, it would
Go
be
out with a
very,
Star
very
Trek film?
strange.
Can anyone see this happening? There's no way, right?
I can't imagine it.
I don't believe this at all. It's like, I mean, I'm not into hip hop really at all, but it's like almost 20 years ago when Eminem said that he was retiring and he wasn't going to rap anymore. And then I'm like, yeah, right. Like, what are you talking about? And he's still done some stuff since then. Like, I don't know if he's come out with a full album, but it's just like, you got to be kidding me. You're not going to do this thing that you absolutely, love doing, and that, like, it's not like an athlete who retires because you
Right.
just can't keep up anymore. Like, filmmaking is not like that. I mean,
Yeah.
Isn't Clint Eastwood in his 80s and he's still making films and making brilliant films?
Yeah, yeah. And then you've got the director of Mad Max Fury Road. I'm blanking on his name right now.
Oh, yeah.
Is that George Miller?
I don't know. I'll look it up.
Okay. But anyway, yeah, you do have, and I mean Spielberg, who's getting up there.
Yeah.
You have so many filmmakers who, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I was really interested in getting into the film industry because I am the type of person who always needs to be doing something. So the idea of retirement has always been this, I don't want to do that. Like, what do you mean I wouldn't have something to do every day? Like,
Right.
even, like I want to keep working forever and to hear Tarantino be like, yeah, you know what? I only have 10 films. It's like, what? How? What does that even mean? Why?
Yeah. Um, George Miller directed Mad Max Fury Road, and he's currently
Okay.
74. So
Yeah. Yeah.
not exceptionally old, but I mean, certainly, like, there's not a lot of, like, outside of something like that, you don't really see a lot of 74-year-olds working. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Um, so, I mean, yeah. So, if you did not know, then Tarantino has said that he is going to make 10 films. And I looked it up, like, after the last time we talked about this, I looked it up. I'm like, I want to hear him directly say this and explain why. And he basically said because he thinks that there's a finite number of good films that he has in him, or really that any person has got in him or herself. And therefore, he wants to essentially, you know, condense it. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, to distill all of his creative energy into 10 films instead of having it get spread out over 20 or 30 films. That, as if it works that way.
Right.
As if
Yeah.
it's like, instead of making three good films, I'm going to make one excellent film. Like, that's not
Yeah.
how creativity works at all.
No, it's such a strange concept. Because I mean, honestly, I don't know any other creative person who would say, oh, I'll never have another good idea again. What do you mean? Like you're saying that, oh, I had brilliant ideas, but only this many. After that, I'll never have another good one again. Like, how? How could you feel that way?
Yeah, it makes no sense. It honestly, I can't understand this at all. Now, his fear, but this is what I wanted to address right at the beginning. So his fear has been that he's worried that he will make a bad film, and therefore, if he sets a finite number ahead of time, then he can potentially avoid this. But then he made The Hateful Eight. And so my point is, you made a bad film, you can keep going as long as you want. You already had one that just wasn't that good. And I mean, so basically I'm staking a position here. Now, if, like, people loved The Hateful Eight, then okay, like, that, I mean, it really is taste, and I'm not saying that The Hateful Eight is a bad film, but it's not a, I don't think it's a great film.
Right. Yeah, no, I would agree. I mean, if anybody, asked me what Tarantino film they should see, like I would go through almost all of them before getting to the to the Hateful Eight.
Me too.
Um, it's just yeah, I'd be like, oh, you definitely have to watch, Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, Jackie Brown, Kill Bill. Uh, yeah, like so many of them. I'd be like, you have to watch those ones. But Hateful Eight, I'm just kind of like, it's fine if you don't see it.
It's entirely fine if you don't see it. There's so many things, like I'm gonna basically go off just a little bit on the Hateful Eight. So these would be some of my criticisms. Number one, he filmed it in Panavision, but then he did the entire thing in a cabin, basically on a soundstage. Why would you do that? Why would you film in Panavision? Take the cost of doing that. In case you don't know, you're using like essentially how does it go? Is it basically like 70 millimeter film, like where it's like capturing a lot more light, it's taking in a lot more light, and that it's like extreme widescreen? Am I getting this right?
I believe so. Yeah, it's interesting because it's different from IMAX. Because
It
with
is.
IMAX, what they do is they feed the film strip the other direction,
Right.
um, and it's also
Like
so it's
horizontally instead of vertically, like or landscape
yeah,
instead of portrait, something like
right.
that.
Yeah, and so then it's able to be twice as wide, but then it's also, you know, like twice as tall. But with Panavision, then it is, I think, just wider film that's still run the same way. I might be getting that wrong, but I know that it is extreme widescreen. That's the
Yeah.
simplest way to put it.
Yeah.
And you're definitely right about that. I mean, I don't know, even the beginning of the film, that I'm just kind of like, okay, I'm getting a lot of shots of nature. That's fun. But then we don't spend any time in
No,
nature. It's all in the cabin.
it's all in the cabin. And it is I'm just sorry, I'm just trying to like clear this up with Panavision.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. Um, in any case, basically, I know that it's a more expensive kind of film and that it's really designed for landscape photography, right? When you're talking
Yeah.
about like these, like especially like with westerns and things like that, when you're dealing with like these wide open vistas, not if you're like, because and I'm saying westerns because if you're on the eastern seaboard of the United States, basically east of the Mississippi, then you're dealing with a lot more of a tree line. And so you're not getting the big landscapes as much, like unless you're like way up high above the tree line.
Right.
But the West, it works really well because you've got these like vast vistas, right? And so
Yeah.
capturing all of that and seeing somebody like crossing the desert, then it like looks really beautiful when you can have this widescreen uh, film where you're capturing all of it. So I don't understand like why he would take on the extra cost of filming like that, um, only to have that at the very, very beginning. And it made it seem like that's what the film was going to be about, that it was going
Yeah.
to really like, because it's like, why are you spending so much time establishing the scenery outside only to then eliminate that visually by having a snowstorm show up and then you are just in one room, just one big wide open room.
Yeah. Yeah. It would be it would be fine if, he filmed only the exterior shots in
Yeah,
Panavision and then everything else was regular.
yeah,
Um, but nope, he was just like, I'm gonna do the entire film in
yeah,
this Panavision, and it's just like, okay, like compared, to Christopher Nolan, who with The Dark Knight, and he was like, all the establishing shots are going to be done with IMAX cameras to
yeah,
to show that the city is a character, but he didn't do it for the entire film.
right,
I mean, there are various reasons for that, but
right.
um, but yeah, I mean, you have to realize that whatever, medium you're using, whatever film stock you're using, it has to suit the
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 story.
film. Yeah, the
Yeah.
story. So,
Yeah. So it just seemed like, well, that was a strange decision, and I don't quite get that. It's not that that makes the film bad, it's just it's perplexing. And
yeah.
then beyond that, okay, this is basically my interpretation of it. So I watched it and then I rewatched Reservoir Dogs very, very recently.
Mm.
Uh, The Hateful Eight is a bad version of Reservoir Dogs.
Yes, I can see that.
Oh, like I'm telling you, think
Yeah.
it through. And it's like, oh, dude, you just did a bad movie of your first, like a bad version of your first film. But your first film is so good. It is Reservoir Dogs is all essentially it's a locked room mystery. There's a
Hmm.
rat somewhere in the group. Somebody's betrayed them. Who is it? Who can you trust? We slowly get little backstories for each character. You get the narrative jumps that you always get in a Tarantino film, and then like it ends with a bloodbath. That's the Hateful Eight, but the Hateful Eight is bad. It's
Right.
that. It's that you have because like you get and it's not even and I'm saying it's bad, but really what it is I find it self-indulgent. It's way too
Hmm.
long. He seems
Yeah.
to be interested in characters and interactions between characters where it's like we get it. We get what you're saying. Like for instance having um the the Confederate officer, the old guy, the Confederate officer, who's completely racist against black people. And then you've got Samuel L. Jackson, who is fighting for the Union, for the North. And it's
Hmm.
like this like whole back and forth. And it's like, yeah, we get it that the Confederate officer is racist, and that dude from like who knows him like from the South, from like South Carolina, I believe he's from, and it's like, yeah, I forget the actor's name. He's been in a bunch of different things.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but
No, it's very true. The film is uh it is very self-indulgent, and it's not bad, but it is just a worse version of, Reservoir Dogs, especially.
right, you get
Yeah,
all the themes that you get in a Tarantino film, and it's like he is retreading all of this ground that he has already done better. He himself has done like
yeah.
okay, because you get this whole thing of um, racism and specifically white black race relations in the United States. Okay, but
Hmm.
that's a big thing in a lot of Tarantino films, including in Django Unchained, which
Yeah.
came just before this. And it's like, well, dude, you just explored this theme in Django Unchained, and I'm not exactly sure what you were offering that is really different or profound or is offering us a new angle, because what was the angle that he had with having these Confederate officers in there with the bounty hunter played by Samuel L. Jackson? What, that people
Uh,
from the Confederacy were racist and they didn't like black people? It's like, and that would have been awkward for black people who became freed. Like, yeah, no duh.
Yeah,
Like,
it's it's a very odd film, and I mean, I'm not saying that I didn't enjoy parts of it. There were parts of it that I did enjoy, but it was too long, too slow even.
yeah.
There was just too much there that it needed some work on. I mean, honestly, at the script writing phase, not even on the editing room, but in the script writing phase, and it just needed some things to be pared down.
Yeah,
Because
I think editing the script, that you
yeah,
could have that big of a script, but then you got to cut it down.
yeah, because they're I mean, Tarantino clearly was like, okay, I have to have 8 characters in here, like 8 main characters or whatever, in order for it to, be the Hateful Eight and all that for his eighth film. And so he came up with these 8 characters, and then he was like, yeah, okay, so I'm going to detail each and every one of these characters. That's that's all well and good, but that doesn't mean that you put all of that detail that you've come up with for those characters into the film.
It doesn't need to be on screen.
Yeah.
And like so many of the scenes in that film, like you get his point and then he keeps going for another 8 minutes. And
Yeah.
you're just like, I get it. And that's where I'm saying that I found the entire thing self-indulgent. I I don't understand because he clearly like he must have had a pretty big budget to make the Hateful Eight.
Oh yeah.
Uh, but then Reservoir Dogs, he had clearly not a very big budget to do that film, and he had action sequences in that. You
Yeah.
genuinely cared about the characters. the and I think like one of the big things that you don't get in Django Unchained or in The Hateful Eight is the use of music. And he
Yeah,
I the use of music in his films is so great.
that's
And
true.
then when like you do like and people I know like some people might give me a hard time about this because you do get the it's an excellent score. Who did the score? Because I know he like a great composer who did westerns. This is going to be
Right.
terrible
Yeah.
that I can't remember. Um, Ennio
Um,
Morricone,
okay.
any Italian composer, and let me just. Uh, sorry, I just want to see like which ones like he's really known for. Like, yeah, like those good old Clint Eastwood westerns, A Fistful of Dollars for a Few Dollars More, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Once Upon a Time in the West. Like, yeah, I mean, he's done brilliant scores, and like, and the score
Mhm.
in the film is great, but there's no part of The Hateful Eight, I think, that goes that really helps a scene the way you get it in Reservoir Dogs with something like Stuck in the Middle with You by Steelers. What is it? Steelers Wheel, something like that. Um,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
like
I
when
mean, even.
Michael Madsen, who's
e-
like doing the little dance, and like
Yeah.
and as he's like cutting off the guy's ear,
Hmm.
and that the juxtaposition of that song with the cruelty being inflicted on the police officer.
Yeah, yeah, it's really interesting because that's what a lot of people have criticized Marvel for, is that their music fits the scene too well all the
Mm,
time. So
mm.
it's just like, so then it doesn't resonate with you. But when hear that the opening song, from Reservoir Dogs, like, it doesn't matter if I'm watching the movie or not, because I just watched Reservoir Dogs. But that opening sequence, I don't know the name of the song, but it's like looking back on the track with a little green back, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Um, that song, every single time that I hear it, then I automatically think of Reservoir Dogs, because
Yeah.
it doesn't fit the scene, but it doesn't match the scene, but it fits the scene.
Yep. Yep.
So yeah,
And music is so important in his films, but
absolutely.
really it's music from the 60s and 70s that he's
Mm,
putting in the 90s and the 2000s. And
yeah.
so there's a little bit of a retro aspect to it, but like because he's using a lot of these tropes from films from the 60s and 70s, so then bringing in a score, or not a score but a soundtrack from the 60s or
Hmm.
70s, just it thematically connects to some of the things that you're seeing visually represented, even
Right.
though, do you know what I mean? Because he's doing like these
Yeah.
callbacks, like with Jackie Brown, for instance, then he's definitely doing a callback to black exploitation films from the 70s. So then
Hmm.
having R&B music from the 70s being played throughout the film where they actively talk about it, like it works so well because you know that you're seeing a film from the late 90s, but you're also seeing a film that is like very much an homage to films from 20 years earlier.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So I'm glad that you brought up Jackie Brown. Do you want to like just go through his filmography and talk
Yeah,
a bit
maybe
about his
maybe we'll
films?
do that.
And I
Let's
had
just
forgotten to start the timer before, so I apologize for that, but I have started it now, so
okay. I don't know what
so we'll
time.
run a little long, but
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, so I just wanted to finish off my thought the with the Hateful Eight. So I'm not saying that it's a bad film. I guess where I'm at is I'm a little angry if I'm only going to get 10 Tarantino films and that's one of them. I think that's really where I'm
Yeah.
at because it's not that I hate the film, but ever since he said that he's only going to make 10, then I'm resentful of that because he certainly can do more. And I guess what I'm trying to
Yeah.
say, not that he's ever going to hear this, but if like enough people like bring it up, of saying like, hey, you can make a bad film and or even make a film that is less than brilliant, and we're fine with that because really I think what made Tarantino great, what established his reputation is that he took risks, and
Yeah.
that, you know, he was making films that were doing really daring and challenging things, and then for the most part they've been really well received. And then to just, I just feel like, I don't know, like I say, I'm a little upset if the Hateful Eight is going to be it, like that's
Yeah.
going to be one of the 10.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's one thing, if you if you say like, I can't keep doing this, I'm getting too old for this, whatever, it's too
Right,
much
I
work for me.
totally respect that.
Yeah, but to just say, I don't have any more than 10 good ideas, and it's like, what do you mean? Like, you are a brilliant filmmaker overall.
Yeah,
It doesn't matter if, not all of them are, you know, like perfect films. Not that there is a perfect film, but
right.
like, it doesn't matter. You can do just some fun things. A lot of directors will do that. Like Steven Spielberg, for example, um, bringing him up again. He's obviously he's done absolutely stunning films like um, Saving Private Ryan, and Schindler's List, and even Jaws. But then he does, do some fun films like Hook, which
Right.
are like, it's like completely different, and it's not a film that's, oh, this is going to be one of my masterpieces. No, it's just a fun film. And like, I think that's part of what people love about Steven Spielberg is all of his films are good, but that doesn't mean they're all the same. Like they're
Right.
not all aiming to get an Oscar. And
Right.
and I guess that's how I feel about Quentin Tarantino, where I'm like, you don't need to have all of your films be at that level. Like, have fun.
I know.
Just do
Well,
whatever you want.
that's why I'm saying that I think that that's why I like comparing the Hateful Eight to Reservoir Dogs, because, you know, I think that he was doing that in Reservoir Dogs. He didn't have much of a budget, and you could see what he did with it. And then when he
Yeah.
is given a budget, to see what he's doing in the Hateful Eight, then I'm just like, you could have so much more fun with all of this. I did not think that it was especially fun to have all these really interesting characters, and to have the all of the technical ability of Hollywood in like 2017 or whatever you're talking about when it came out, to have all of that, and then you do it all in a cabin. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't seem like you're having fun. I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know.
It's such a strange move, frustrating move, really. It's I don't know. I guess a part of me feels like I mean, yes, certainly there are really good comparisons with Reservoir Dogs, but then he also, has like the different like chapter titles or whatever, which is taken
Hmm.
straight from Pulp Fiction,
Yeah.
but it's not. There's no reason for it to be in there.
No.
It adds
No.
nothing to the film, really.
Right.
And then you've got, some characters who are like, isn't it what's the actor's name? One of the actors, like he's like a big star, like Channing Tatum or something, and he's like in the basement of the
I know. The
cabin.
entire time.
Yeah, for like 3/4 of the film. And it's just like, why are
Oh,
you
it's way
spending
more than 3/4. He's got like
Yeah.
5 minutes of screen time.
Yeah, that's
I
true.
know, that's what I'm saying, is like, you have the star power, and then like, and not just the star power, but Channing Tatum. I'm pretty sure it's Channing Tatum, who's in the basement, and then it's like really capable actors who could physically do all kinds of stuff, and then
Yeah,
you get them just standing around talking, and like for the entire time. Then I'm like,
yeah,
there's no action in a Tarantino film until the
right.
very, very end. It's just, it looked like a play, right? Where
Yeah,
like just a stage. And I'm not trying to say this in a bad way, but I'm like, you spent so much money, I'm sure, in casting, you know,
yeah.
for
No,
all of
I
those actors.
agree.
I don't think it's the best use of his resources if we're only getting 10. If
Yeah.
we're getting more than that, then I think I'm going to have a more favorable view. That I'm like, well, all right, that was something
Yeah.
different. Not my favorite Tarantino film, but all right.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It really did feel like Tarantino was being, again, very self-indulgent. He was like, I want to
Yeah.
work with Samuel Jackson again. I want
Yep.
to work with Kurt Russell, Channing
Yep.
Tatum. Like,
Uh-huh.
it's just like, okay, but why? Why do you want to work with them? And if you're just like, oh, because they seem like fun people, it's like, well, but that's not a good reason to make a movie. Like,
Right. Yeah.
because I mean, he clearly, I don't think, it's a stretch to say that he wrote Samuel L. Jackson's character for Samuel L. Jackson.
Right. Yeah. And that you then even get Samuel L. Jackson, who, he's been shot and he's bleeding, and
Then
it's
he's
like
sitting in a bed forever.
right, and then he's just in a bed. It's like, ooh, boy, like if I got to cast Samuel L. Jackson in a film, then I don't think I would just have him sitting in a bed the entire time.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely.
And yeah, I don't know. But I'm saying that like with Reservoir Dogs, then you definitely get that, like where you've got the character. This is terrible that I can't remember. I don't know why I'm blanking on so many actor names, but the actor who's just, there and he's been shot. He's like the undercover cop. He's in like almost every Tarantino movie.
Hmm. Yeah,
Um,
I can't remember his name, but uh
Tim Roth. That's it. Tim
oh
Roth,
yes,
right?
that's right.
Where it's
Yeah.
like Tim Roth is just like bleeding out, then ultimately like he's able to like shoot Michael Madsen, and then it's the same thing in the Hateful Eight, right? It's that
Right.
Samuel Jackson. You
Yeah.
think he's down and out, and he's bleeding, and he's not going to really make it, and then he starts shooting, and you're just like, I'm like, you duplicated one of your films, and you did a worse version, but I'm only getting 10.
Yeah, but yeah, and even talking about that, then like Tim Roth wasn't, a big name at the time that
No,
Reservoir
no, no, no,
Dogs
no.
came out at
Right,
all. So,
right.
when he gets shot, you really do think, yeah, he's gonna die.
Uh-huh.
Once you get to the Hateful Eight, then it's like, well, yeah, I guess Samuel L. Jackson could die at some point, but like, it's not the same kind of feeling because you're just like, I want to see more of Samuel L. Jackson. Like, I don't want him
Yes.
to
I
die. I don't
know.
want him to be just laying in a bed.
Right. Like Tarantino was like, I'm going to give you these really interesting characters. This Samuel L. Jackson, who, I think was he a slave? And then he fought for the North and then he got captured, then he escaped. Am I getting it right?
I think so,
He
yeah.
got captured. He was in some kind of a prison, and then I think he escaped, and then he becomes a bounty hunter. And you've got
Yeah.
Kurt Russell, who's a bounty hunter, and I'm like, cool. So you've got some of like these like grizzled badass guys, and then it's like, okay, here's what we're gonna do: Kurt Russell, Samuel L. Jackson, okay, bounty hunters. All right, I'm with you so far. Late 19th century, gotcha. And they're gonna be sitting on a stagecoach. Okay. And then they go in and they warm up by a fire. All right. And then somebody poisoned the water hole. You know, like, and then it's like, then Samuel L. Jackson, he's got to lay down for most of the movie. Okay. I'm really starting to question everything about this. I'm kind of getting disappointed here.
Yeah.
Why didn't we see them be bounty hunters?
I don't know. I know it's the movie starts off and it's like, yep, we already have this
I
person.
know they already had her.
Oh, okay. I think you get, these sequences of like, yeah, let's put the horses away. Oh yeah, let's make sure to mark a line out to the outhouse. Is that going to
Uh-huh.
be important later? No.
No,
Okay, cool.
I know. That's what I'm saying. It for a film that had so many resources. It felt like an amateur attempt at like it felt like the film that should have come before Reservoir Dogs. It's like,
Right.
oh, that was his first attempt. And then he did a really good version of this locked room mystery with
Yeah.
a character bleeding out in Reservoir Dogs. But instead, it's number 8. And then
Yeah,
like I just
it's like like a compilation of all his different films.
yeah, Yeah,
takes all these different aspects. It's like,
totally.
oh yeah, you got Django Unchained
Yep,
in there for sure. You got Reservoir Dogs, you got Pulp Fiction.
yep.
Like, I don't know. I don't get it. Why?
I
Why?
don't get it either. I don't get it
Uh,
either. So,
yeah.
okay, well, let's start doing that then. So, Reservoir Dogs. When did you see this?
I saw it just last week, I think. Yeah,
Okay, me too. Me too.
cool. That was
Well,
the
I mean,
first
I
time that I
rewatched
had
it. I
ever
watched
seen
it
it.
like 20 years ago, and then I just rewatched it.
Right.
Sorry,
Yeah.
what did you
Yeah.
say?
Yeah, this was the first time that I had seen it. I always knew that I should see it, but it was just, one of those films that fell through the cracks. And
Yeah.
um, but my goodness, it is a great film. It's so
Yeah. Oh
good.
man. When I rewatch it, I'm like, oh, this holds up. Like this
Yeah.
really holds up. Now that I've seen it, like, because I saw it, I think that was maybe the third or fourth Tarantino film that I saw. I think that I saw it definitely was Pulp Fiction first, and then I think it was Jackie Brown, and then I probably, yeah, I'm sure I saw Reservoir Dogs before seeing Kill Bill. So that was like the
Okay.
third Tarantino film that I saw. So then now going back to it, that I'm thinking, oh, is this going to really feel like a first film? And then it's like there are elements of it where I see that, um,
Yeah.
but overall, it just works so well.
Absolutely. I mean, it's I hate to keep comparing it to the Hateful Eight, but in the Hateful Eight, then it's you get this moment of Samuel L. Jackson being like, "Oh, I knew that you were bad because she wouldn't let any Mexican even into her cabin, like let alone let her like leave her cabin in the hands of a Mexican while she's wherever." And it's like, "Oh, okay, well, whatever. I guess you just told us that." But in Reservoir Dogs, there's like this really great shot where like you can see on the counter in the background the orange juice on one side with like a pink bottle of something with it, and it's like, oh yeah, Mr. Pink and Mr.
Mm.
Orange are together, like Mr. Pink is like getting in the way of Mr. Orange. And it's like those little details where it's like that's purely visual. It's so good
Yeah,
that you're not going to pick up on it, but it's there in a visual way, in a way that
right.
is just it's so good. Like, and I may be getting the colors mixed up, but
No, but your point, yeah, I get your point. Yeah.
yeah. So it's stuff like that where you're watching it and you're going, okay, yeah, there are little hints here and there, so that you can kind of see these representations in the background compared to the Hateful Eight, where it's just them talking about why each of them is untrustworthy.
I know the entire time. And even like the Tarantino um signature, I mean, I think it's fairly safe to say that it's a signature of his films, the narrative jumps,
Yeah,
right? How it's a non-sequential narrative, that it's not going sequentially or chronologically, that he's jumping around.
yeah,
That I that's not necessary in the Hateful Eight. Like
no,
it really isn't, because it's like, is anybody surprised at the end that like you couldn't trust these characters, like, or even that there were people in the basement? Like, I don't think any of that stuff was really necessary to
yeah,
have to go out of order like that. But it works so well in Reservoir Dogs
hmm,
because you learn that little bit of background information about characters as you go through the film.
yeah.
That it just becomes necessary, and the film works so well because of that.
Yeah, and it's about the characters knowing so little about each other and
Exactly.
discovering these little
Correct.
details as they go. It's so good.
Yeah. And
Um,
I think to me, what holds up so well in Reservoir Dogs is the very end, when Tim Roth, he's dying. I mean, I think there's no way around this, right?
yeah,
He's gonna die, and Harvey Keitel is gonna die. And Harvey Keitel, his character, has been standing up for Tim Roth the entire time. and
Yeah.
to the point where he ends up getting shot in the Mexican standoff, right, where you've got like three
Yeah.
different people all pointing guns at each other, and then so Harvey Keitel is there, and then like when Tim Roth, he looks up at him, he's like, "I'm a cop, I'm a cop," and then like you could see Keitel is just like knowing the betrayal and the
Yeah.
agony, like you can see the anguish in him, and that like he wants to kill him so badly, but he's dying himself, and like he doesn't, and he's angry, but he doesn't have much left in him, and he's trying to point the gun, and it's just like, oh
Yeah.
my goodness, that whole thing is, whew, the ending of it is so brilliant, and it's like, and that
Absolutely.
tension that you get between characters. And again, like I know that like it's probably not a good way to approach this, but if you look at the end of The Hateful Eight, it just, there's no tension there, where
Yeah.
you've got Samuel L. Jackson and that guy, it's so terrible that I can't remember the actor's name. I think he's from The Shield. I think he was on Sons of Anarchy as well. I'll
Mm,
look it up. But in any case, because I know I've watched him in other things, I just can't
right.
remember his name. But it's so great. The ending of it is, I don't know what you thought about that.
No, absolutely. That, oh my goodness. Like the fact that that Tim Roth's character was able to convince, everybody that he wasn't the undercover cop, the
Yeah,
snitch, and then having him just, he's dying and he just has to
he
let
has
Harvey
to he has to
Keitel know.
confess. Yeah,
Yeah.
he can't
He's like,
die with
I'm
the
so
lie being
sorry.
there, right?
Like,
And you can see that he is sorry. He's sorry that he's a
yeah.
cop. He's sorry that Harvey Keitel bought it. He's sorry
Yeah.
that Keitel's going to then die as a result of it. I'm saying Keitel because I can't remember like which color he was.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so um, just it's such a raw emotional moment. The acting, I mean, I find that you and I, especially when we're talking about directors, we talk so much about like um the script, the dialogue, shots, the visual aesthetics, the use of music, but the direction of them in their acting choices. And I'm sure that the actors had a fair bit of say, but the way, like, if you like, you could study that scene of seeing, you could basically see in Harvey Keitel's mind all of the different things that he's going through, all the different
Yeah.
feelings that he's like, the denial, the anger, the everything, right, of
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
processing
I mean,
this, and
because
what
he
do I
has,
do, and
yeah, he spent so much time protecting this guy that, like, he doesn't want to kill him because he's
right,
like,
right,
man, I spent so much, like, it cost me so much to
yeah,
protect him
yeah,
that, like, I don't want to do this, but I feel like I have to do this because he's so betrayed. Oh,
exactly,
it
exactly.
it is such a human moment in a film. I mean, in that Quentin Tarantino relatively rarely
That's what I was
touches
gonna
upon.
say. He actually doesn't really do that because his characters, and I'm not saying that, I don't mean this in a negative way, but all of his characters act as though they're in a Tarantino movie. There's a
Right.
little bit of surrealism to his films, right? They're
Yeah.
they're not heavily, like, while they are to some degree grounded in reality, there's a little bit of surrealism or absurdism to everything that's going on. Um,
Yeah.
do you know what I mean? That
Yeah, no, for sure. It's I mean, Tarantino has said that he has like two different film universes that he deals in, which one of them is like the real world and the other is the realer than real world.
mm,
And it's a really strange concept, but he has apparently a distinction in his mind about what he's making with when he's working on these films. So there definitely is, you know, I mean, in Kill Bill, right? Like it's pretty surreal. It
yeah,
gets
there's
you
moments
got
of
like the crazy
absurdism,
88 and everything.
right?
Like,
Right.
Yeah.
It's definitely like these over the top characters, and that you see that in, the level of violence, the level of blood, where at times it becomes humorous,
Yeah.
right? Instead of it, like, it's not an agonizing thing where it's difficult to watch. It's just you're looking at this and it's almost cartoonish.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Um, but yeah, Reservoir Dogs is uh, I would say definitely one of the more realistic of his films.
Yeah.
I mean, even like when you have like the ear chopped off, it
Yeah.
doesn't start, squirting blood
No.
nonstop. It's
Yeah.
just like you can see it and you're like,
Oh
oh
yeah.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
what it would look like.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
oh my goodness, the way that he, just pans away from it as it
Yeah.
goes, oh, it is so well done. Because I
It's
was, I wanted to like look away. I was like,
I
I,
know.
and
That's
I
actually
don't
it.
do that often, like
Right.
I watch when like I don't care about blood and gore, but my goodness, I
I
was
know.
literally about to look away, and then the camera
Hmm.
did it for me.
I know, like you're grateful for it. You're like, thank you. I know exactly what you mean because that then puts you in the state of mind, like this state of empathy or at least sympathy. But for the characters, for Tim Roth who's dying, the police officer who's tied to the chair, that it's very uncomfortable. Uh, and okay, I want to know what you think about this, but Steve Buscemi's character, who
Yes.
is so terrific. I mean, Steve Buscemi, I mean, I don't know if I've ever seen him where I'm like, ooh, I didn't like that. Like,
Right, yeah. He's such
I don't
a
know.
weird, wacky character all the time. It's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah, he's terrific.
Yeah.
And so the thing that I like so much about his character in this film, and this is my interpretation of it, I think this is the right way to interpret it. He is desperately telling everyone, let's act like professionals. Why can't we just be professionals? We need to be professionals, right? And then he's ultimately the only one who survives because he didn't participate in all of this. He actually
Yeah.
was, for the most part, fairly professional. And then I'm pretty sure that, well, I don't know. I guess he doesn't know where the diamonds are, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know if
Well,
he's going to get away with.
right. Did they go and pick up the diamonds before?
Oh, maybe.
Yeah, I think they went and picked up the diamonds and then like brought them back to that place and then
Okay. Yeah, you might be right. Yeah.
um yeah, no, because he was the one who had the diamonds to begin with. He's the one who got them.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, but yeah, oh my goodness, his character is fantastic though. I mean, even in the opening scene, I don't tip. What do you mean you don't tip?
Oh, yeah. That's a great opening scene. And that's such a great, like,
Oh,
we look at it now and we're like, that's a Tarantino scene.
right. Yes, but it is such a brilliant scene. I don't know if you've heard or seen this around, but the fact that it's Mr. Pink, or yeah, like Mr. Pink is Steve Buscemi's character,
Yeah.
but it's Mr. Orange, the undercover cop, who says Mr. Pink's the one who didn't put in. So he is already, selling somebody out, like even in
Right.
that opening scene, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh man, that's so good. Like
Yeah.
you get a little hint there. And
Right.
again, it's something that it's not, oh yeah, I should like later on, it's not like, oh yeah, I should have known that you were the undercover cop, or I did know that you were the undercover cop because you were the one who sold me out at the beginning. Like,
Yeah.
no, there's none of that. It's
Right.
all just, the little details for for people like us who really love to study
Yeah.
film. And
Yeah.
that's how those films feel.
Right.
Most of Tarantino's films feel. And then you get to the Hateful Eight, and you're like, it seems like a mass market kind of film, but it's
Yeah.
still Tarantino in the level of blood, gore, and
Yeah.
and vulgarity.
Yes. Yes, exactly. But yeah, I don't see how that really holds up to uh to watching it again. Like when you're
Yeah.
looking at it again, I don't know how rewarding that would be,
Yeah.
because it's all right there.
Yeah.
But the other ones, I feel like you catch things the more you look at it.
Yeah.
I mean, I could be wrong about the Hateful Eight, but that's kind of my impression. And at the same time, though, with Steve Buscemi's character, with Mr. Pink, then on the one hand,
Why
he
am I
is
Mr. Pink?
right. This is what I was going to say, is that he is a professional and he's demanding that everybody be professional, but at the same time he definitely has got lapses where he's not professional. And it seems, so is he professional or is he just entirely selfish? Because the whole thing with tipping, I think, is a really good point, because that is how the film starts, and that seems to be kind of a selfish thing of he's not going to tip for selfish reasons, and then he doesn't want to be Mr. Pink for selfish reasons, even though for professional reasons, well, just who cares about what your name is, right?
Yeah.
But then he selfishly cares about that, and then he selfishly, like, he's trying to defend himself for self-protection, doesn't want this thing to get out of hand. That is he actually being professional, I guess? Like, I don't know if I'm like backtracking what I'm trying to say earlier, but is he actually professional, or is he really just that, self-involved?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because we don't get he is one of the few characters that we don't get to really see any backstory on.
No.
Like, why was he chosen for this? Why did he decide to be part of this mission? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to try to think about, what is his stake in all this? Why did he decide to be part of this? And
Right.
that's fascinating to think about, because it's like, well, maybe, I don't know, because he definitely does seem like he's done these things before,
Oh, yeah.
but he doesn't seem like he necessarily, I don't know, he kind of likes doing it, but I don't know. He's a very interesting character in the
He
film.
is. And I
Yeah.
think it holds up better because we don't know that much about him.
Yeah,
Which,
absolutely.
again, contrasting that with the Hateful Eight, then
Mhm.
it's yeah. Okay. Do you have anything else with Reservoir Dogs, or can we move on?
I think we can move on. Yeah.
Okay. So Pulp Fiction obviously is the next film. That's what, 94, I want to say. I think Reservoir Dogs is
I
92,
think
and then
so.
Pulp Fiction is 94. Uh, I mean, it's hard. Like, I know that Pulp Fiction was obviously Tarantino's breakthrough film,
Right.
and for obvious reasons, and I don't know how necessary it is for us to go over all of the things in Pulp Fiction that make it brilliant.
Yeah. It's
Aside
a
from, yeah, like us just saying, like, it's brilliant.
Right. Yeah, it really is. I mean, one of the things that I love about it is uh, that it's told in asynchronous order.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, like the last line of the film, uh, what it would be chronologically is uh, oh my goodness, I can't remember the actor's name. Bruce Willis. When Bruce Willis, him getting on the bike with his girlfriend, and he says, Zed's dead, baby.
Yeah.
That's the last line chronologically, but it's not actually the last line in the film.
Right.
Uh, and I mean, it's just like, again, little details like that all add up. And
Yeah.
oh my goodness, and Samuel L. Jackson's wallet, and oh, the gun just went off, and oh man, there are bullet holes behind us. Like, oh my goodness, there's so much that's so good
Yeah.
about the film.
What is it? Is it
Uh,
Phil Lamar? Is that it? Who gets his
I
head
think
blown off?
so. Yeah.
Isn't he from Futurama?
Yeah, he plays
I
Hermes.
remember him on Mad TV, but yeah, he's on Futurama. Like, and yeah, like,
Yeah.
but it's one of those scenes where, like, this is where you start getting it. Like, this is obviously the Tarantino universe when you think about Tarantino films. Like, that whole
Mhm.
scene where, like, I honestly don't know. I gotta imagine most people who are watching that scene laugh when he gets killed.
Right.
because Travolta's turned around and he's like, "Are you telling me the blah 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 blah?" And then boom,
He's mid-sentence and everything.
mid-sentence. And like when you're watching this, you're just like, I don't quite know how he achieved this directorially. I don't know, like through tone and characters and dialogue, but it's funny. And I don't know why that should be funny, but it is hilarious. There's so much of it. And then it just becomes this entire thing of just trying to clean up that mess of.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. Oh my goodness. It is it's so fantastic. And the other thing to say about Pulp Fiction is its connection to Reservoir Dogs. If I'm remembering correctly, then uh, Mads Mikkelsen's, is that how you say his name? I forget. Anyway, he in Reservoir Dogs, right? Um,
Michael
what's the
Madsen?
Yes, thank you. I'm like
Yeah.
I was completely off there, but yeah.
Yeah, Michael
Michael
Madsen.
Madsen. Then his character's name is what? Vincent Vega, I think. Uh,
That's Travolta's character.
okay. Anyway, they're supposedly brothers, but they were supposed to be the same character originally. Uh,
Oh.
and Tarantino like didn't. I think he couldn't get uh, Michael Madsen um, or something like that. But anyway, he changed it and eventually just decided, this will be the last days of each of the Vega brothers. And I was like, okay, that's kind of interesting.
Huh. Um, yeah, and
And there's also like radio chatter about like a robbery that's currently taking place during Pulp Fiction, and it's like, oh, okay, so is that referencing um,
oh, that's
Reservoir
interesting.
Dogs?
Because he's got so many different actors who were in like well in all of his films, right? That he has his favorites. Because there's Tim Roth, who's in Pulp Fiction, right? Because
Right.
he's trying to rob the diner where
Yeah.
Vincent and what's his name? Samuel L. Jackson's character. What's his name?
Um,
I want to say Julian, but
Jules. Yeah.
Jules. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, that yeah. Anyway, so like you've got Tim Roth who's trying to rob the place, but then you've also got Harvey Keitel who's playing the wolf,
Right.
right? Who
Yeah.
comes and rescues them. And then I'm trying to think that might be it for crossovers
Yeah.
between Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction.
I mean, then you've also got Tarantino himself.
Right. Yeah, Tarantino. Yeah, that's true.
Um,
Um, yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't even know what to say because, like, just Pulp Fiction is just I've watched it I don't know how many times, and it's staggering how good it is. Like, it's hard to even
absolutely.
break down how good it is because there's so much going on. You've got so many characters who are all interesting. Everything about it is compelling. The film, even though it is an asynchronous chronology to the film, it still is propulsive. It's propelling you
Hmm.
forward. Like you watch it and it's just like you want that next scene and that next scene and that next scene, and it feels like one leads into the other, even though you know that it's going out of order.
Yeah.
Um, like it's just
Absolutely.
there's so much to it, and like having the star power that he had in that film, and somehow
Which was difficult. I know that he had to get all of the actors, I think, to agree to like all be paid the same.
oh,
Uh,
that's interesting.
because he couldn't, do it otherwise, having these big name actors in the film, and then these or so many big name actors, I guess. Um, but yeah, and I mean, even just some of the film techniques that he used. For example, you've got a car that crashes into a house in one scene, right?
Yeah.
Um, but for one thing, that's his car. That's Tarantino's actual car. Um, but he couldn't do it, actually crash his car. So what he did was he had one car, like a, a duplicate car, that was parked there, crashed into the house and then just drove another car by in the background so that you're seeing it from inside the house and you see the car go by and then the camera comes outside and the car is there crashed into the house.
Huh.
And it's like, well, those are things that, he had to do for budgetary reasons and all that, but like he figured it out and it works so well. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
because he still did that in one long shot. So
Right.
it's so good.
Huh. Very interesting. Yeah, the filmmaking techniques are brilliant, and the dialogue, the way these characters interact with each other, the dynamics
Big Kahuna
between
burger.
Oh yeah, I mean, like there's so many, like almost every conversation in the film is classic, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like if you're looking at, even just something like when they're talking about the idea of like, oh, he threw that guy out a third story window because he was giving a foot massage to his wife. And then it's like,
Yeah.
oh, well, that doesn't really seem cause for throwing somebody out a third story window. And then it's like, well, would you let another dude give you a foot massage? And it's like, well, no. And it's like, therefore it's intimate. And you're just like, the logic of, right? Like these conversations, or like Christopher Walken when he
Oh, the
gives the
watch.
whole story of the watch.
That story.
Like,
I love that. It's all done just with one like shot. You're just looking at Christopher Walken
Right.
telling a story, and you're just so compelled. You're just like,
that's what I'm
okay.
saying. Every scene has got, like, you want to watch to the end of every scene. It's very compelling and it's very propulsive, because then you get to the end of a scene and then the next scene starts and you just, like, I don't quite know how he's doing it, but he's able to, no matter what he's doing, whether it's action sequences or conversations, you just want to keep watching. Because Pulp Fiction is a pretty long movie, and it doesn't feel like a long movie.
No, not at all.
Right? But The Hateful Eight feels interminable. Like it feels like it drags, but Pulp Fiction is just zips along. I think in like
It's
maybe it might seem like a strange analogy, but it's like, in part because of what I'm reading right now, but like reading a lot of thrillers where you're getting it from multiple characters' perspectives with very, very short chapters. It's like a book like that. It's a page turner because you've got short chapters and you're only following these characters for like 2 or 3 pages, and then different characters, then different characters, then different characters. And from a narrative standpoint, that's so effective.
absolutely. Yeah, everything about the film is just brilliant, and I mean, the iconography from the film is perfect. Like, I mean, who hasn't seen a poster of Jules and Vince, in that classic pose? Like,
Right.
And then you even get variations on that of like monkeys standing there holding bananas and everything. Like,
Right.
it's just so iconic.
Yeah. Or I mean, Travolta with Uma Thurman when they're dancing
Yep.
together. And
Yeah.
and that's what I'm saying is like the entire, like, this is very much the Tarantino universe where there's a level of surrealism where it very much feels like you're in a Hollywood film. And I mean that in the
Right.
best way possible, right?
Yeah.
That it's like,
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
even when Uma Thurman is
Yeah.
like, you're a square,
Right.
and like
And the
it
actual
actually
shot.
appears.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And just that little thing that it's like, this isn't quite reality. And that's why I'm saying that it's
Yeah.
surrealism, but it's not heavy surrealism. So
Right.
it's got these slight dreamlike elements to everything, to the characters, where you're just like, they're characters. They're not real people.
Yeah. And
Do you know what I
Tarantino
mean?
has talked about this too, where he said, like, I mean, he said this in regards to, people being like, oh, your films are really, really violent. Are you ever worried about the effect that it has on kids? And he was like, no, a kid knows that he's watching a movie, just like, like I've never been sitting in a movie and been so enraptured by the movie that I forget that I'm watching a movie. And it's like, well, yeah, I can like to some degree, I agree with that. That's
Yeah.
there's you can get totally sucked into a film, but it except for those rare occasions where, like the Blair Witch Project or something, where it's purposefully playing with, is it, a
Yes.
real event or not that you're
Yeah.
watching? Outside of that, then yeah, like that you're watching a movie.
Right.
And he's like, yeah, so why not? Have things pop up on screen, have characters who are realer than real, as he would say,
Yeah.
yeah.
It is a level of hyper reality.
Yeah.
There are aspects of that, and I like it. Like I like seeing all of the different approaches that cinema offers, right? That cinema as an art form can just do so many different things, and you can do things that are just heavily grounded in realism. Um, but you can also have just outlandish cartoonish stuff, and you can have
Yeah,
everything in between, right? And that's wonderful.
absolutely.
Like that's what's great about it is that you can achieve all of these different effects. And I like the way Tarantino does it because he's not too far in this spectrum. Like he's not straying too far from reality, but
Hmm.
just enough that he's able to put things on screen that if it was a gritty crime thriller, they'd be unwatchable. Like the
Right.
violence that he has in his films, like if you look at Reservoir Dogs, we are grateful that the camera pans away during the ear, excision, right? Where
Yeah.
the like you're grateful that it pans away, but in the rest of his films, you've got stuff that's much more violent than that,
Yeah.
but you're not um, begging for the camera to move because
Mhm.
you know that you're just slightly out of step with reality.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. All right, do you have anything more to say on Pulp Fiction?
No, we'll move on. We'll move on.
Yeah.
So
So,
Jackie Brown, right?
yeah,
90
this
97.
is I would say this is the hidden gem of
Yes,
Quentin Tarantino's career.
I
It is
couldn't agree more.
so good,
Yeah,
and yet I don't hear people talking about it. People talk
yeah,
about Pulp Fiction like crazy, but Jackie
yeah.
Brown is so incredibly good.
I agree.
Oh man, I could just keep watching that nonstop. It's so
Me too.
good.
I love Jackie Brown. I think it's just such a brilliant film.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know, you can help me out with this, but I'm just quickly looking it up here. And it says that the film is an adaptation of Elmore Leonard's 1992 novel Rum Punch. Oh, never
Mhm.
mind. I have the answer right here. It is the only film that Tarantino has adapted from a previous work.
Yeah.
So that I
That's
think this is what I was going to say about Tarantino with only doing 10 films. And it's like, well, he just doesn't feel like he's got more than that in him. Then I'm like, well, has he done an adaptation before? Because, like, if that's it, if he feels like he only has so many original films in him, then okay, I guess I can accept that. But what about all these adaptations? Because he's saying that he wants to do a Star
mhm.
Trek film. And then if this is an adaptation of an Elmore Leonard novel, then, you know, like, why not do more adaptations of things? Because Jackie Brown is
Yeah.
brilliant.
Oh, absolutely. Oh man. I would love him to do more films like Jackie Brown, and I feel like he's really moved away from that kind of film, which is disappointing because it's so good. I mean, I don't know how Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is going to be. Um, it might be closer, but I think, now that he's got, basically an unlimited budget and full creative control and all that, um, I don't know if we're going to see more like that. But my goodness, and I have to bring it up. Jackie Brown has Michael Keaton in
I
it.
know. I'm looking here and I'm going because it's been a long time since I've seen Jackie Brown. I've seen it several times, so it's been a while. And I'm like, wait, who does he play in it?
He
What's his?
plays what are the detectives?
Okay, yeah, that's what
Yeah.
I thought. Yeah, so I mean, like right there, the film has got Michael Keaton in it.
Yeah, so it's automatically a good film. Just
Therefore, excellent film.
yeah.
um,
Oh man.
yeah, I mean the relationship between Pam Greer's character, Jackie Brown, and Max Cherry, I believe it is, who's played by Robert Forster, I believe. Yeah, Robert Forster. Like I love the dynamic between them. There's these quiet moments of
Mhm.
like and that you don't get a lot of quiet moments between characters, and really just a lot of quiet moments in general in Tarantino films. But
Yeah.
you've got these like really nice quiet moments between the two of them, and they're both these characters where they're a little world weary, and they
Yeah.
could be cynical, but they seem grateful for any moments of tranquility and peace that they can find in life. And it's just, they're really great
Yeah.
characters that you don't see in cinema that much.
Hmm.
Just people who have seen some things and have had tragedy. Um, and, you know, but they still haven't, they're still grateful, right? I don't
Yeah.
know. There's a certain beauty to the dynamic between them and just them as characters.
Absolutely. No, I mean, it, the entire film is just brilliant. And I feel like most people have not seen this film, so go out and watch it if you haven't seen
Oh
it, because
yeah,
it is so good, so rewarding. Um, man, yeah, I don't even
Samuel L.
know.
Jackson is so great in this movie. I think it's the
Yeah.
coolest he's ever been. I don't know, with his like
Uh,
Kangol hat and like the braids
yeah,
that he's got. Like, I don't know, he just
it's
seems
true.
super cool in this movie. I don't know why I feel that way, but like, yeah, I just like him as a character in this. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I don't even know, what to say about Jackie Brown. It's a fairly straightforward film for Tarantino. It's, got a nice little heist plot in
yeah,
there. The old switcheroo, all that kind of stuff that's going into it. And I mean, it has been a little while since I've seen it, and honestly, I want to watch it again now.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, like it's so good. Everything in it.
yeah.
And yeah, like Jackie Brown herself, is, at this breaking point of like, okay, well, is she, going to actually help the police or not? And
Right.
that's really interesting. It feels like probably the most realistic of Tarantino's films.
I think so too. The other thing that I really like about Jackie Brown, and that I think is a through line in a lot of Tarantino films, which he has gotten away from in the last three, I want to say, is he seems to have, there's a level of intimacy that he has with LA, right? That he just
Yeah.
like it's very much an LA film, and I really like films that really explore Los Angeles as a city, because I think it's such an interesting city, because like there's so many New York films, right?
Right.
A
Yeah.
lot of Boston films as well, and you get this with other cities, but yeah, there's this, like I say, there's a level of intimacy that he seems to have with LA that gets explored in this. It definitely gets explored in Pulp Fiction. Um,
Yeah.
you know, I'm trying to think. I'm sure that it comes up in Kill Bill, does it not?
Um, hmm.
Isn't
I
much
feel
of
like it
Kill Bill?
does.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I think so. I think like Bill's house is in
that's what I
LA.
thought.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't know.
yeah.
It's seeing these characters who are living, like seeing their in Jackie Brown, then you get these quotidian moments of life in LA. You also get the same thing in Pulp Fiction to some degree, which is then like interspersed with crazy violence. But
Right.
like, I mean, quotidian is in just like ordinary day-to-day things where it's
Yeah.
almost, um, you know, documentary like in seeing what this is like, and to me it's interesting, like being from the north and then seeing this city that feels so far away, and it's like, oh, okay, like that's what it looks like, and that's what, the your daily activities within LA.
Yeah. You know, I know this is pretty unrelated, but when you said, there are a lot of films about New York, I immediately went to that scene from Spider-Man where, it's like, hey, this is New York. You mess with one of us, you mess with all of us. And I'm just like, okay, yeah, it's, New York, we stick out for each other, whatever. I was trying to think, like, I don't, I can't think of any major superhero film that takes place in LA.
Mm, that's a good question. Like, I don't know if there is. Well, because there's a certain, okay, I'm interested in Los Angeles as a city. Now, like I'll say this, like I have never been there. My late mother-in-law, then she was born and raised in LA. So I
Mm,
got to ask her a whole bunch of questions about it, like
mm,
growing up in LA in the, late 50s or then 60s and 70s. So I mean, I've been able to kind of pick her brain on that. Um, but LA is such an interesting city because it's so different than the northeastern cities
mm,
because it it didn't because it's such a new city, then they built it as a modern city. In other words,
right.
there's no density to the city. It's not congested. It's not like,
Mm,
and I mean, like it is because you have so many people living there. But I'm saying, like in New York City or Boston or Philadelphia or Chicago, Detroit, all of these old northeastern cities, you know, I mean, I know like Chicago's more in the Midwest, but or even like Baltimore, because they're old cities, then they were built before cars. They were designed like, and they
yeah.
were designed when there was no urban planning, and you had to walk to get everywhere, or there was some like you could travel by horse. But then LA was designed essentially in like during the American Industrial Revolution and afterwards, where it's just like it's sprawling, and as a
Yeah.
result, there's from what I understand, there's far less of a sense of community in LA that
Mm,
you don't get that, hey, you're in New York, you mess with one of us, you mess with all of us. And it's like LA, a lot of, there's a lot of being disconnected from everyone. Um,
right.
that
Yeah.
you don't know your neighbors in the same way because everybody drives everywhere is my understanding of it because it's so spread out. And
Hmm.
so you don't have a lot of pedestrian traffic. And so everybody, like, they get out of their house, they get in their car and they travel somewhere and then they go into that place. But there's not a lot of interaction with people as a result of that, unlike in New York where you have the subway and everybody's walking on the streets, and it's where there's
And even
just a little.
apartment buildings, it's obviously a lot more difficult to build taller structures out in LA where, you're almost right on the fault line, right?
Yeah,
Um,
I imagine that's got to be an aspect to it, is you are
mhm.
dealing with earthquakes for one thing, and that, yeah, you have this space for it to sprawl. So it sprawled. Uh,
Mhm.
but it ends up with a very different vibe than what you get in most big American cities. And I
Right.
feel like
Yeah.
Tarantino captures that fairly well. Um, I don't quite know how else to describe it.
No, yeah, I think that that's a really interesting approach because his films are about individuals
Mhm.
more than anything else. And yeah, they're tenuous relationships with one another.
Yes, because even in Reservoir Dogs, it's not like, see, if this was like a Boston or a New York film, it'd be the mob, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because like they'd all know each other, everybody in the criminal community. But it's like in LA, there's this level of anonymity that seems to
Mm,
exist of like nobody knows anybody because
yeah.
no one's from LA, is like what like historically has been said, right? That
Right.
everybody moves there. And so you don't have history and roots and tradition where you do in like Boston, where it's like, well, this is an Irish part of town, and like New
Yeah.
York, this is an Italian part of town, and it's like LA, it's like this belongs to like no one, right? I mean, they have
Hmm.
neighborhoods where you obviously have got certain ethnic groups or whatever, socioeconomic classes. You get into like Beverly Hills or
Yeah.
whatever compared to like Compton and all of that. But there's this level of there is no history here, and
Right.
there is no there that LA is kind of absent all of those characteristics, and that everybody is kind of isolated, that like that there's a level of social isolation that seems to exist in LA, from what I understand and what critics have said about it, that doesn't seem to be there in other cities.
Yeah. No, absolutely. That's such a great insight into I think what makes some of Tarantino's films stand above the rest.
Yeah, I think that's it. Is like I think in part what makes them so interesting is that you're seeing something that feels real but different,
Hmm.
right? Like it's
Yeah.
not that familiar. It's acknowledging like it's grounded in reality to some degree, but it's defamiliarizing you at the same time as trying to familiarize you with the setting that you're dealing with.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, okay. We should keep moving
Yeah.
moving on.
Yep.
All
Plus, you
right.
get a big
So,
jump, don't you, between Jackie Brown and then Kill Bill? Isn't that like 6 years or something in between the films?
oh, possibly. I mean,
I
Kill
think
Bill
Jackie
is,
Brown was 97, and then Kill Bill was 2003, and then 2004.
yeah. Yeah, I
I
think
don't know if
so.
there was anything, I don't know what he was doing in between, but
Yeah, I
that's,
know that he like, I don't know, directed an episode of CSI and
oh,
some
okay.
smaller stuff, but I don't know if it was then or when he did it. But I mean, Kill Bill is also a much larger film in
Sure.
many ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, I mean, it's it's international. It's
It
uh,
is.
um, yeah, it's just more epic in scale. And I mean, honestly, oh man, Kill Bill is so good. It is so much fun to watch. I have to say, I think that part two drags quite a bit.
Mm.
Um, that part one is, or volume one is so much more interesting, so much more fun to watch.
I agree.
Um,
I think volume one is better than volume two. And I think volume two does do that of a fair bit where it does drag at times. It's a film that, in so many ways, it's like, it's the ultimate Tarantino film. Um,
mhm. Yeah.
where you're dealing with so many characters who are characters and are not real people.
Yes.
you know and
Yeah.
then you're getting all of these allusions to old Hollywood tropes, and then you're starting
Mhm.
to see influences from like kung fu and like with Asian cinema. And I don't know, there's so much going on there, but at the same time then it still has these quiet moments too.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's such a compelling film. I mean, you really are with um uh Beatrix or the bride
Yeah.
uh through it all where she wants to get her daughter back. Like,
Yeah.
and you're just, or she doesn't even want to get her daughter back. She wants to get Bill back for
Yeah.
the loss of her daughter because she doesn't know that her daughter is alive until the end of volume one. Um, but yeah, I mean, you're with her 100%. You don't fully understand the world that she is a part of, but you're just like, she's been wronged. I want to see her get justice,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
uh yeah. I mean, her journey is fascinating. It's all of the characters though are really like they're so good. Um yeah, but it's it, I think one of the reasons why volume two feels underwhelming to me um is because I mean, at the end of volume one, you've got you know her versus the crazy 88 and everything and Lucy Liu,
Yeah.
and oh, it is that entire sequence, like where it goes to black and white for a while. Oh,
Yeah.
it's so good. It's
Yeah.
so much fun. And I mean, even just the visuals in it, where she's dressed in the yellow jumpsuit.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah.
And then you get into volume two, which gives you a lot of backstory. And I mean, one of the first things that happens to her is like she gets thrown into a coffin and
Right.
buried alive.
Yeah.
And then she has to, like do this like 3-inch punch or 2-inch punch,
Yeah.
whatever it is, to get out. But you have to do like this whole flashback to like, okay, how did she get trained and all that? And it's like, oh, okay,
It's
so
Slumdog Millionaire.
yeah.
It's like, how did he know the answer to this question? I'll tell you. And then we go back.
Yeah, I'm like, I just saw her kill like 100 guys in the last
Right.
movie, and then I'm spending 30 minutes watching her,
Hmm.
being trained by this guy who all he can do is like he like strokes his
Right.
beard and then tosses it.
Yeah.
Which I mean, that's a fun character as well, but
Yeah.
it's just this really slowed down the pace of the film. I think if it were one film, which it was originally intended to be,
Hmm.
um, then it maybe wouldn't feel that way as much. But then the punch of, does she know her daughter is still alive? That's all gone if it's, you
Yeah.
know, it, it's interesting because I don't know. I haven't seen the whole bloody affair, which is what he calls, the two films together. Uh,
Okay.
but uh, but yeah, so I haven't seen that version of it. Um, so I don't know if there's
It's
anything
different?
else. I don't know.
Oh,
At
okay.
the very least, I think that there would be that, one part at the beginning of volume two where she describes, now I'm going to kill Bill, like whatever. Like she's like driving in the car and explaining
Yeah.
that whole thing. I would imagine that that would be absent from volume two at the very least.
Right.
But even just watching it, as one film without credits in between and all that, then I don't know how it would play. Um, it would be interesting to
He
watch it. Right?
I think Kill Bill especially, like it's in so many ways, it's like I say, there's so many allusions and homages to all kinds of different elements of like of cinematic history, because it's not just
Mhm.
Hollywood history, right? But like
Right.
world cinema, because he's referring to all kinds of different things, and they're homages. Like there are these like little like acknowledgments of I loved this element, this trope, this
Yeah.
influence, right? But he kind of, especially in Kill Bill, I feel like this is like Tarantino is to cinema what Hideo Kojima is to video games. Of you have got so much, you've got so much that you want to do that at times it's like maybe this is a bit too much.
Right.
Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? I got the name right, didn't I? Hideo Kojima, who did
Yeah.
Metal Gear Solid. Yeah,
Yeah.
where I mean, like, because I've heard this said before about Hideo Kojima that like he initially wanted to be a novelist, but he couldn't possibly write anything that would be like within a reasonable length for a novel. Like
Mhm.
it's like my novel's gonna be 5,000 pages, and it's just like
Right.
that's a bit much.
Yeah.
And it seems
And even
like
for a film, like if you just look at the cinematics from Metal Gear Solid, like the first Metal Gear Solid, it's over 3 hours. It's like 3.5 hours long.
right. That's what I'm saying is
Yeah.
that there at times like it's great that he's got so much there, but it's almost like he's a victim of his own inspiration. That's a little
Yeah.
bit of how I feel about Kill Bill. And then like with The Hateful Eight, I feel that way
Mhm.
too, where it's just like you love this art form so much and you've got so much to say, but you're trying to fit too much into one particular film.
Yeah, uh, I mean, it's a fairly common expression, I think. You have to kill your babies.
Yeah, kill
That's
your
what it,
darlings. Yeah.
yeah, like that's what it is. And Tarantino, I don't think he knows how to do that. I don't think that he I don't know. He
I
just
think
puts
he
everything in there.
can. but I think that he's not being asked to anymore.
Yeah, that's
You
fair.
get the
Yeah.
same thing with Stephen King. And I mean, a lot of people, like, nobody knows exactly what's going on with that, but everybody, but like, without officially knowing, we all know exactly what's going on because Stephen King will, like, I mean, the amount of books that he has published that are well over 1,000 pages, like, it's like half a dozen of them. And then a whole bunch of books like that are just really, really long. Now, I've read almost all of them and I enjoy them, but a lot of people will point to this and they'll say that he can get away with it where other authors can't, that editors don't have the kind of influence over him the way they would with a less established author. That you always see this, that they end up, because it's hard to argue with the commercial success that a person has had in the past, so then they get more free reign. But the problem is you can become a victim of having too much slack, right? Like
Right.
you hang yourself by giving him too much rope. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
That I think is part of it, is that if he was forced to put Kill Bill into one film, 2.5 hours at the absolute limit, do
Hmm.
it. That's what you've got. And it's like, but I
Yeah.
want to do this and I want to do this and I want to do this. It's like, great, then do that in a totally separate film. But
Right. Yeah.
you know what I mean? I just think that there's a little bit of that, of try, because he's got so much inspiration, especially at that point in his career. I feel like there was just so much that he wanted to do, that you only had 3 films up until this point, right? You had
Yeah.
Reservoir Dogs, which is a great crime thriller, and then you've
Hmm.
got Pulp Fiction, which is in part a crime thriller, but I don't exactly know what it is. But you've got Pulp
Yeah.
Fiction, that's, I don't know, there's all kinds of stuff to that. And
Yeah.
then you get Jackie Brown, which is very much an homage to black exploitation films, and it's a little bit of a heist film, and
Hmm.
you know, but then you get into this, and it's like, oh, well, he's like, well, I'm interested in westerns because you have that with like Michael Madsen, and
Hmm.
kung fu cinema and martial arts cinema, and then like I mean, just like, and all this stuff from the 70s of these action shows from the 70s with the ridiculous music and character
Right.
names, and it's like he's like, I want to do all of those things, and it's like, okay, it's great that you've got so many ideas, maybe too many for one
Right.
film. That's my only
Yeah.
thing with Kill Bill. I just think that it's too much for one film. That's why I don't like this whole idea of I'm going to do 10. um I I don't know. I
Yeah. So one thing that I'd really like to talk about is one of the people that Beatrix kills in the first volume of Kill Bill is I forget what her name is, um, but anyway, but she kills her like in her home,
mhm.
and she's got the young daughter.
Yeah.
Um, I would have to, double check this, but Tarantino said, I believe I can, one year that he's always kind of had an idea for a Kill Bill Volume 3,
Mm.
um,
Of
which
that
would
girl
actually,
grown up who goes after the bride.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
which would be fantastic in my opinion.
Yeah.
That would be a great, I think, bookend to his to his career.
Yeah.
If those were like, if he released volume 3 and 4 and had it be, okay, this is my last film, these 2 parts,
Mm.
then that would actually, I'd be, I think I'd feel better about the limit on how many films he does. But I don't want that day to come.
Yeah. I don't know. The other thing too, and this is like a whole other conversation, but I wonder if Uma Thurman is willing to work with him again.
Yeah, I know. There's there is that too.
Yeah.
It's yeah, I don't know. I would love to see a Kill Bill Volume 3, but I totally understand if it doesn't happen.
Right. Yeah. Can we move on?
Yeah.
Okay. So, what's next? Is that Inglorious Bastards? Is that the next one?
I think it was
Or
Death Proof,
Death
but
Proof. I apologize. Yeah.
neither of
So
us have seen that.
yeah, neither one of us has seen this movie, so we're gonna have to just skip over that. I mean, I'm familiar with it. I know that it's doing homages to like these double features that you got in like the late
Mhm.
70s at drive-ins, like big action. Um,
Yeah, I still think that it's odd that he considers it, a full film.
how long is it?
I'm not sure, but because it's, part of that double feature element, then it just seems a little odd to me.
It's 113 minutes, so it's
Oh, okay,
definitely
never
a full
mind.
film. Yeah.
Uh, um, okay, but yeah. So anyway, moving on.
Yeah, we'll just move on because yeah, neither one of us has seen that one. So,
Yeah,
Inglorious Bastards. This is from 2009.
yeah.
Um, I,
Very,
I go ahead.
very oddly spelled.
Yes, very oddly spelled.
I don't know why he decided to spell it that way, but
I don't know.
whatever.
He just does things. He just
Yeah.
like, and that's kind of what I like about him is that he just does
Yeah.
things, but at the same time that like that's what I'm saying like with Kill Bill. It's just like people like I think a lot of people will point to it and be like that was weird and it's like yeah, that was weird. Like you think he
Yeah.
doesn't know that? He knew that that was a strange thing to do. Like
Right.
I hate that kind of criticism of like, well that thing was weird. It's like, yeah, no duh. That was intentional.
Right.
So now it's your job to figure out why that strange thing happened. So yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know why he spelled it that way, but
Yep.
yeah,
It's
but he did.
yep. It's fun. I always just refer to it as Inglorious. But because I try not to use that other word.
Well, what's the problem with bastard? Bastard is
I
just
don't know.
it's a proper term.
I know. It has a negative connotation and I don't like it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Okay.
anyway, but that film is absolutely incredible. I
Oh
love it.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
so good. And I know that you have a story of seeing it in theaters, correct?
Oh, yeah. Okay, I won't say who it was with. I will leave his name out of this, but basically I saw this movie in the theater, and so then there's me, this nice public school teacher, sitting next to my best friend, a pastor. Okay, so he's a pastor of a church. And then the end, when they just unload on Hitler with these machine guns and like, just and he's just like getting riddled with bullets. And like I'm grinning from ear to ear. And then I turn and then my best friend, the pastor, is like grinning from ear to ear. And we're like, oh, this is awesome. And we're like, yeah, shoot him in the face. Kill him again. Like, it's this great thing. I mean, it's like that's where we can all come together as a society. Hitler sucked.
Absolutely.
And
It
that was
is.
a much more fitting end. I love that idea of like it's like hyper reality that this is not the real world. It's a better world. Wouldn't that be
Yeah.
a better world where that's what happened to him?
Yes. Oh my goodness. I just want to talk about that one scene.
I know.
It's
Yeah.
so satisfying.
It's so
I
sad.
will rewatch the movie just for that one scene because it's
Yeah.
so good. It's
Oh,
so
it's worth it.
oh
And I think it's so brilliant because it is alternate history officially
Mhm.
is what he's doing, but you don't know that it's alternate history when you're watching the film. So you believe that Hitler will get away, that they're going to
Yeah.
do all of this and that they will fail and that ultimately like because it seems like you're watching a pretty traditional historical drama, a war film that is for the most part just going along with history. And it's like, but we know the history behind this.
Yeah.
So there's this dramatic irony of we know more than the characters in the film. We know how this plays out. Hitler's not going to die in this theater in France, right? That the war is going to continue going on, and that's not how you're going to get him. Uh, and so then it's this big flip and like you can't quite believe what you're seeing the first time you watch it. You're just like because you want it to happen but you know that it doesn't happen and then he gives it to you. And to me
Yes.
that's the great thing about Hollywood, or not just Hollywood, but that's the great thing about cinema at times when you're able to vicariously live out these wish fulfillments,
Yeah.
where you're just
Yeah.
like, that would be a great way. I wish, like, when I was reading my history textbook the first time, it was, and then like the
You were
Allies, the
shot in the
Americans,
face
stuck in.
50,000 times
That's right,
and
just
burned in a theater.
burned him alive. Yeah, like, well, burned him dead, but yeah, they just burned him. Like, yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
like,
it's I mean I loved it the first time that I saw it. I felt like, oh man, like they both have these plans to kill Hitler, and I think they're gonna get it in the way of each other, and
right,
like one will like cancel out the other, and somehow he'll get away. But seeing that both of the plans work perfectly, it's so
yeah.
good.
Oh, it's so
It's
good,
so
and I think,
satisfying.
I mean, like, often then, obviously, like, if anybody has not really watched these podcasts, then like you wouldn't necessarily know it from what we're talking about right now. But often I feel like we get fairly intellectual in our
Right.
like analysis of films. But so we haven't really done that so far. But I think that there's something significant to the way Hitler dies at the end of Inglorious Bastards. That it's in a theater, and it's ultimately like
Mm,
cinema that kills him, right?
right.
With this
Yeah.
fire, and that kills the Nazis, because you're in a propaganda war, right? That you're definitely in a physical war, but it's also showing the power of cinema. Don't you think that there's something to this, that this film is exploring this
Absolutely.
idea that movies have got power? They have power that is, in some ways, that you have the rifles, or the machine guns that they fire at Hitler, but you've also got what's going on screen and the fire from that, and it's all in a theater. That it's like that the pen is mightier than the sword. There's an element of that within art, and
Yeah.
the depictions of Hitler in the late 1930s and into the 1940s, that you see this in comic books, of like having like Superman punch Hitler,
Right.
and
Yeah.
like the different propaganda posters and all of that, that through visual depictions, through art, that we're able to win in other ways, right? You're able to win
Mm,
moral victories, right? And that
yeah.
you're able, and controlling the narrative, um, because it really was. I mean, in the 1930s, then there were these big shifts. You have Russia, it becomes the Soviet Union in the early 1920s. So it's like you have communism that's starting to spread, fascism throughout Europe that's starting to spread. And then you've got these countries that remain, that are standing up for democracy, they're standing up for liberty, they're standing up for freedom. And how do you do that? How do you resist these huge opposing forces? And it's like you have to prove that, even though these other countries are in the midst of the Great Depression, movies are like, you had so many people who were going to the movies in the Great Depression. Like, it was
Right.
incredible how many people were going to the movies, and it's like that there was a certain power of cinema that helped strengthen, um, you know, America, and it helped strengthen the Western world,
Hmm.
despite the struggle that everyone was going through. And that while Germany turned to another way of fighting off economic depression, which they dealt with in the 1920s through fascism, then the rest of the world didn't, and they kind of suffered through. They suffered through it, and they didn't turn to this evil form of a dictatorship, right?
Right.
I don't
Yeah.
know. I just think that there's something about that. There's like really great films that explore this theme. Sullivan's Travels is a great film. I'm trying to think of when that's from. I
Hmm.
feel, ooh, it's gonna bug me. It's Let me just quickly look that up. But basically, it's kind of a comedy film, but it's about a screenwriter who wants to make important movies, and it's taking place during the Great Depression.
Hmm.
And he is intent on making films that will actually help the common man. And he, at this point in his career, he had only written comedies. And then he through a series of events, he ultimately gets imprisoned, and so then he gets this opportunity. So he ends up in like a chain gang, 1930s, and they show them a movie, all the prisoners, and it's a comedy. And like I say, Great Depression, so everybody's already dealing with terrible stuff, and then on top of that, you're a prisoner during the Great Depression, and everybody's laughing, and he's laughing, right? And then he turns and he looks at everybody who's smiling, and for the briefest of moments, they're able to transcend the misery that they're going through, and realizing that that's the power of movies. That's the power of cinema, that it is stronger than so much else. And I don't know. I just think that there's something to that.
No, absolutely. I mean,
Sullivan's Travels is from 1941. So,
wow.
World War II was going on. Yeah, 1941.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, as we've said, countless times, like Quentin Tarantino has an admiration for cinema, for all things cinema.
Yes.
And he knows how powerful cinema can be. And it's wonderful to see him explore cinema during, this crucial time. I mean, and everyone was working on propaganda films one way or the other. And
I mean, Hitler made good use of propaganda films, like the Will, what is it? Triumph of the Will. Right?
Yeah.
Riefenstahl, who, like, I forget exactly how he did it, but he took this German director, Riefenstahl, and then he was like, you're going to make this great Nazi propaganda film, Triumph of the Will. Or what the Soviets did, where the Soviets were making propaganda film to, like, show the virtues of communism. And then you had these other filmmakers in Hollywood who were, including German directors, who had escaped Germany, who were like showing like, no, screw that, like that this is a democracy with all of its weaknesses, is like, we can't become fascist, we can't become communist, we can't give in to totalitarianism.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even Walt Disney, the icon of children's cinema, was producing propaganda films for the longest time, showing, oddly enough, Donald Duck as a Nazi, and and all this, where, like showing like, we have to stop them, we have to stop the Nazis and Germany and all that. So it is fascinating to see how it was such a powerful tool of the Second World War. And Tarantino, with his love of all things cinema, I think it's a perfect film for him, like a perfect story for him to tell.
Absolutely.
And honestly, just 100% wish fulfillment, not only for us, the viewer, but for him as a director.
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, like even the projectionist, right? Like the power of the projectionist, that she has over this, and she creates this alternate film, which completely changes the meaning and all that. I think that's, he very much sees himself in that character, of like, we can stop anything, through, like, if you've got a good enough story to tell, essentially.
That's right. Yeah, that stories, like, they are like narratives, stories themselves, that they can change the world. And for good or for ill, right? And I think it's really significant. I have not fully worked through that idea, but I know that there's something really important going on there, that it's so much of it has to do with the theater. So much of it has to do with films, because it's not like it just like has got a few moments at that theater. The theater is really important to that film.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
you know, like you see her changing like the letters, you
Yeah.
know, like all of that. Like I'm saying, like there's a lot that takes place with that.
Yeah.
The other great thing with Inglorious Bastards, very briefly, is you get to see Christoph Waltz, who, oh my
Mm,
goodness, like is a mind-blowing performance. It's
yeah.
incredible.
He is fantastic. My goodness, he's so incredibly good in that film and in others, but this was his real breakthrough.
Yeah.
Uh, and yeah, he's he's a character that's always smiling in a conniving kind of way where, you know, like I don't know. He's evil, but not in a mustache twirling way, you know? Like
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, no, he does such a
They,
good job of portraying the evil of Nazism without making it outlandish.
yeah.
Of yeah, it's really that there's a certain level of sophistication and elegance that he
Mhm.
brings to it, um, that eh, it's like a gentlemanly psychopath, you know, where he
Right.
seems
Yeah.
to be being polite, but you know that he really is completely immoral.
Yeah.
Uh, like I don't know,
Yeah.
it's
No, it is fascinating to watch his character,
yeah,
and to watch his performance.
yeah,
Because I mean, honestly, he is always smiling in that movie, like
right,
always.
yeah,
But it's not in a way that I don't know. It really is just so fascinating to see. Uh, it's a character that isn't really shown in, certainly not in Hollywood cinema very often, where
you're right.
you know you've got a Nazi who is happy being a Nazi.
Yeah,
Right? Like
yep,
that's, but not in a, again, not in a mustache twirling way, not in a, you
right,
know, kill them all, angry sort of, you
right.
know, yeah, we'll rule the world. He really is like, he's just happy doing his job. And it
Mhm.
is so fascinating to
Yeah,
watch that.
totally.
Because there had to have been people like that during
I'm
the Second
sure.
World War.
Oh, I'm sure.
And the fact that, you know, we haven't gotten to see something like that before, it's fantastic.
It is because um, Nazis, of course, were real, right?
Yeah.
And so they were real people. And you look at what happened during World War II, and especially with the Holocaust, then you've got to understand that you can't, it does no justice to history if you turn them into cartoonish villains.
Yeah.
Um, and at the same time, you can't diminish the level of evil that existed. So you have to treat them like
Yeah.
real human beings who many of them were fully aware of what they were doing, and they
Yeah.
did it anyway, and they didn't seem to do it reluctantly. They seemed to do it
Yeah.
willingly and with, you know, I'm sure for many of them with glee. I mean, the really unsettling thing is that so many there was no. I mean, I've been reading up on this because right now I'm teaching American history. So, and you know, we recently went through a study of World War II, and there was no um, actual policy for the Holocaust. It wasn't a dictate of kill them
Mm,
all, but it happened. So
right.
you're like, they just like it wasn't discouraged, but it also wasn't a policy that had to be enforced, which meant that it was just happening a lot, that they were just killing people a lot. Um, you know, there's certainly the policy of getting Jews and putting them into concentration camps, first
Hmm.
into ghettos and then into concentration camps, and then you know working them to death. But the level of murder that was going on within these camps, then it was just like, well, you can kill them if you want, but you don't have to kill them, right?
Right.
Like if
Yeah.
they're mouthing off, you don't have to kill them, but you can. And that the amount of soldiers who did is
Hmm.
truly unsettling. Um, And I think that's yeah, that's the thing. I think like with Christoph Waltz in that you can see that he's not just following orders.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. Like, I think that's what it's capturing is that a lot of
Yeah.
these people they killed without being forced into killing, that it
Yeah.
was a voluntary action. Um, but yeah, and so it's like you get that in the film, but then you also get this wonderful simplistic solution to things of that can only exist in movies of and then we shot him in the face.
Yeah.
Right? And you're just like, yeah, it didn't happen like that, but wouldn't that have been great if it did? Like, wouldn't it be great if we could solve problems that easily, you know? That it's
Right.
like there's this terrible evil person in the world who's just doing awful things and it's like just get a few soldiers together and shoot them in the face.
Right. That's how we solved the North Korea problem. No, that's
Right. Yeah,
be
it's yeah.
fantastic, but no, that wouldn't work.
Right. I mean, like that's what happens in oh, what's that one? The James Franco and
The Interview?
The Interview. Yeah, in the Seth Rogen film. Have you watched that?
I haven't, no.
Well, it's basically Inglorious Bastards at the end. It's essentially that. It's like killing Kim Jong-un in the most like gratuitous way possible. And you're just like, well, that took care of that. And it's like, well, it wouldn't. It wouldn't. You're still dealing with like, yeah, just a lot of problems that would still continue to exist. But it's a nice solution that can exist in cinema that doesn't really work in the real world.
Yeah.
All right, that was good. What's the next one? Is that Django?
Unchained.
Okay, yeah, it is. Yeah, I don't know. What'd you think of that?
I really enjoyed it. It didn't reach the levels of, some of Tarantino's earlier films, but Leonardo DiCaprio gives a fantastic performance. I mean, the one thing that always comes to mind is, like when he smashes that glass in his hand, and then he's just like plucking the glass out of his hand because that wasn't scripted. Like that actually happened. He was literally pulling glass out of his own hand during, like, without breaking character.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, he did a fantastic job in the film, and you've got I'm blanking on the lead actor whose name.
Well, who else? Yeah, because you've got, I know Samuel L. Jackson is in it, Leonardo DiCaprio, Jamie Foxx, I think. Yeah,
Yes,
Jamie Foxx.
that's right. Yeah,
And
then
then,
you've also got Christoph Waltz.
Christoph Waltz is in it. Yeah. Kerry Washington, Walton Goggins. Walton Goggins is the guy in The Hateful Eight that I kept trying to think of, the guy from the South.
Okay.
Yeah, Walton Goggins.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, it's a fun film in that, you're watching this slave being freed, like, and it's and trying to save his wife. It's again, this revenge type of story. I mean, revenge is kind of the wrong word in this case. I would say it is more him trying to seek justice,
Yeah.
And yeah, it's really interesting to see how it's a fascinating depiction of that time period, I would say, because you are seeing slaves and everything, and when he rides in on his horse and all the slaves are looking at him like, what is going on here? Like they're taken aback by it. It really does a good job of laying out all that socio-political tension, racial tension that existed in that time. And then, but then it also has Samuel L. Jackson's character, who he could have helped them. He could have helped Jamie Foxx, but I don't want to say he liked being a slave, but he liked, his master, right? Like he was loyal to his master, to the point where he didn't care about his own people, where he
Right.
was more interested in what he called his home.
Yep.
Uh, and that's a really interesting story because again, like and I feel like it does play that way. I in a time where some people try to argue that there were some slaves who liked that way of life, and it's like, well, they didn't like that way of life, but they certainly had a level of loyalty to whatever family they worked with, and
Yeah.
not
Oh,
all of them,
no,
but
no, no. I know exactly what you mean. This is the part of the uncomfortable reality of the history of slavery is that
Mhm.
there were some, um, there were certainly plenty of slave masters, owners of slaves who treated their slaves very well.
Mhm.
And where the standard of living, this is historians who have made this argument. This is not my argument, but historians and um, slave owners in the US South, and they would point to this. But then historians have kind of examined this question where they would say, look at freed African Americans in the US North, and then look at their living conditions compared to the living conditions and the standard of living of slaves in the US South. And that slaves on a plantation in the US South often had a higher standard of living, as in a better diet, more stability, like in terms of like clothing and housing, like, and all of those things, than freed African Americans in the US North. Now, there are reasons for this, in part because there was still racism in the US North.
Yeah.
And so Black people were not able to earn the same wage that white people were able to earn. They
Right.
didn't have access to the same jobs that white people had access to. And so, of course, you're going to deal with poverty, but that's
Mhm.
not poverty because you're left to your own devices. That's poverty because there's systemic racism.
Yeah.
And so then they would point to that and then they would say, well, look, slavery is because it was completely based off of like awful racist ideas of racial hierarchies, and then saying that African people, so then in this case African Americans, that they were unfit to take care of themselves and they needed a white person to take care of them. So they would point to that. So then historians have examined that. They're like, well, there is some element of truth to the idea of the standard of living between the North and South, but that certainly doesn't mean being a slave is better than
Right.
being a poor but free African American, right? That
Yeah.
it's like, even if like basically it's like if you have the best conditions possible in a prison, but the reality is, but you're still a prisoner. You still are
Yeah.
denied that fundamental thing that all human beings want, which is to be free.
Yeah.
And so if you're being denied that, that's a real issue. But for a lot of African American slaves, and that was the only life they knew, and it was their home.
Yeah.
And they had family, although often family members got sold off to other plantations, but they still did have family. And so something that would upset that, yeah, I mean, that's basically the character that you have with Samuel L. Jackson,
Mhm.
who's defensive of that. Yeah, it's a really it's a complex and difficult historical phenomenon to
Yeah.
look at, right? And it's interesting the way Tarantino, he just kind of like goes at it head on, and
Yeah.
he's like unafraid to make this film. um I admire that. I admire the fact that like
Yeah.
he is willing to go and do that. Like he's certainly not being timid here. uh,
Right.
I like I've written like my first book, Orphans of Liberty. Like some of the reactions that I've had, because it very much deals with race relations.
Mhm.
Like that's one of the themes, is race relations in the United States, and it's like some of the reactions that I've had that I'm like, I don't know how Tarantino has dealt with this. Like like I've had because I have a character in my book who I think the N word comes up twice. Now, I was never really sure if I would ever use the N word in literature in my own writing. Like, I will not say it aloud. Um,
Right.
because, and I'm saying the reason why I bring this up is that as an English teacher, then at times you're going to read a book, like because we still do teach books that do have the N-word in it. So like if you're teaching something like To Kill a Mockingbird and you're reading it aloud to the class, what do you do when you come across the word? Right? Do you read it aloud or do you censor the text? And then you're like, ooh, well, that puts me in a very difficult position. So I made the decision, even if the text says it, I won't read it.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's like, if you look at it, then like Leonardo DiCaprio, then he uses the N-word a lot in Django Unchained.
Yeah.
But nobody's saying Leonardo DiCaprio used the N-word.
Right.
They're saying a character that he played used the N-word. Right.
Yeah.
And because he was playing a racist character. So I've had people, though, say that I'm racist or my book is really offensive because the N-word comes up twice. And then I'm like, it was a completely racist character who used it. And as I was writing that, I'm like, well, if a character would say this, I'm not going to censor my character because like the only reason why people find the N-word offensive is because it actually gets used in the real world by racist people.
Right. Yeah.
That's the only reason why it's offensive.
Yeah.
If it didn't exist as a word, if it wasn't like if we didn't have a connotation for it or a denotation for it, like then it would have no meaning. So I'm like, that's why it's a troubling word, because it does have power. So that's why people who want to use it as a weapon will use it as a weapon. But then Tarantino, like I say, I mean, like that's me where I'm like, oh man, that's actually a little bit hard to hear when people say that about my own writing. When they accuse me of things where it's like, well, I know that that's not true. Like you're making an accusation against me that I think is really unfair, saying that like it doesn't belong in the story. Then I'm like, yes, it does. And but Tarantino is just like, boom, like he just. I hesitate to use the term like bull in a china shop, but it's basically a bull in a china shop. It's that it's almost because it's not reckless, but it seems reckless. Like he just goes in there and he's like, I'm going to take the most difficult topic essentially in American history, and I'm just going to like go crazy with this. He's not making like what Spielberg did with Schindler's List, where that is a very careful film. Like you've got to be really careful with something like the Holocaust. And then it's like, you've got to be really careful when it comes to slavery and having a house slave who is playing in some ways what would be described as an Uncle Tom type character, right? Who is more sympathetic to his master than he should be, and all of these things, right? And then it's like, that's a really touchy subject. And then Tarantino is just like, I'm telling my story.
Yeah. No, I know. I do really like the film for that unabashed look at the historical context of this story. You're right that nobody was talking about Leonardo DiCaprio using the N-word because that was his character. But I know that people did complain about Quentin Tarantino's character in the film using the N-word. And I'm like, okay. Like it's like, well, why did he make himself, that character who would use that word? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't.
Did they honestly think that it's such a weird thing? It's like people who criticize that, it's like they think that there's some white people who want to say the word. So they're trying to come up with clever ways to be able to say it. And it's like, well, any white person, any moment of privacy, if you wanted to say the word, you could say the word.
Right.
Like, what? You think that this is some like devious trick to be able to say it publicly without getting in trouble for it? Like, is that what they're saying?
I guess. Yeah, I think
don't
so.
know.
But it
I
is
don't
a
have
very...
much patience for that.
Yeah. No, it's something where I look at it and I go, well, I would never do that with myself, but I'm not going to be like, oh no, Quentin Tarantino is like purposely, like, I don't know.
Well, I know. Well, that's the thing. It's like, I mean, like me personally, I'm not an actor, but if I were, I don't I don't know if I could take on a role where I would say the N-word. And then even for my own book that I'm thinking about doing an audio version of it where I would like to do the audio, and then I'm like, I don't want to say that word. I certainly don't want to be
Right.
recorded saying that word either, you know? So
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, great. This is just like when I'm teaching To Kill a Mockingbird or something like that, except it's my own book now. And so like I
Yeah.
get the conversation that's going on, but I'm saying like I've made a personal decision that I just don't want that word to ever, cross my lips.
Yeah.
But I don't, but I can recognize the difference between acting and real life, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. I mean, uh, I I I also, like I made a conscious decision to stop swearing in general. As you know, like I don't the worst word that I use occasionally would probably be damn. And like that's very, very rare. Generally I only use it like when I'm acting. And one time then I used another word while I was acting. And honestly, like I look back at that footage and I'm like why did I say that? But like it fits in the story. So,
Yeah,
it's stuff like that where I do have to make that distinction between, well, that's me acting and the character would say that. So it works in that context. But
hmm,
I would never, and I write characters who use the F word and everything, which is something that I haven't done in like I don't know, like 15 years.
right, right.
Um, so but I don't have a problem writing characters who will use that language because it feels inauthentic to my story
Exactly. Right.
if
That's
I take
exactly
that.
it. Yeah.
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 Um,
There's a lot of people who just don't seem to really know that. I don't know. It's such a simplistic understanding of art where it's just like that we get our morality from art, right?
right.
That's the criticism of Tarantino is like, oh, his films are going to make people violent, right? Like what we were talking about earlier. And it's like this idea of, oh, if there's a character within a film who's racist and people are going to watch this and go, I'm now racist. Like it's,
Right.
it's such an idiotic idea of like we get our
Yeah.
morality from films that easily. And I'm not saying that it
Right.
doesn't have some kind of influence, but we definitely are making conscious choices when
Yeah. I
when we
mean,
think
again, like I love watching these films.
right,
um, but I don't use, a lot of the language that's used in these films.
right,
And, if I met Quentin Tarantino, I imagine he will say quite a few of the words that I wouldn't, and he would
right,
kind of look at me funny for not using those words. But, and he's like, and you like my films? Like, no, he's just going to be like, yeah, you like my films. That's cool. You
right,
don't have to say those words. That's your
right.
decision. That's
Yes,
it's the
yes,
distinction.
yeah.
It's not encourage. He's not trying to encourage people
No,
to use these words. Yeah.
nor is he encouraging people to be like crazy violent, try to pluck out
Right.
eyeballs and like attack people with a samurai sword. He's not trying to do any of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. I,
Come on,
I, I
people.
love. Yeah. I love when he gets asked that in interviews. Oh, it is fantastic. He's like, "Do you ever worry about the effect that?" Now, Wait. What do you mean? I'm not getting into this discussion. I'm just shutting you down right now. Like that's
Yeah.
really one of
Oh,
the
that's
interviews that
good.
he had.
Yeah.
So he's like, "No, I'm not letting you, twist this story into something that it's not because you're not like you're talking to me." And, that's not something that is true.
Yeah.
So he wouldn't even let that conversation go.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
Um, I just want to very briefly just say, so I think with Django Unchained, and I want to finish up in like just a few
Hmm.
minutes here. With
Yeah.
Django Unchained, I think I found moments of the film overlong. I felt that it was a little self-indulgent. And then that really, like, you see it so much more so in The Hateful Eight. Like, I found,
Absolutely.
like, especially the stuff with, like, Leonardo DiCaprio when he's really going on about phrenology right? With like the shape of a person's skull, phrenology,
yeah.
like, and that determines intelligence. And it's like, look at a white person's skull and a black person's skull. And it was just like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I, I mean, like, maybe if like you've never heard of phrenology before, then
Right.
you'd be like, whoa. But I'm just like, yeah, I know that was a racist idea in the 19th century that's like trying to bring like scientific study to racial
Yeah.
hierarchies. And I found like a lot of those scenes like around that dinner table that just went on and on and on.
Yeah, no,
Uh,
that's definitely fair. And one thing that I uh that I have to kind of complain about is the overt nudity.
yeah,
There were times where it's like, okay, yeah, whatever, but then there were other times where it's just like, you really didn't need to shoot it this way. Like we could have
right,
done without that angle.
right.
So and there were only a few scenes with that kind of stuff in it, but it's but yeah, I do agree that um, Tarantino was definitely getting more into what we saw with the Hateful Eight.
Yes.
Very very self-indulgent, and I mean even the opening sequence of Django Unchained, and I mean honestly, the film takes a while to really get going. It I don't know. You are watching these slaves marching, in chains, across the countryside, and then Christoph Waltz character comes and frees Django, and then they train for a while, and it's
Yep.
just kind of, even though Django doesn't need training because he's already a crack shot, like
I know.
it's a little weird, and that's the part of the film that I don't like. Like the opening, just it goes on for far too long
Yeah.
before we really get into the film, and it could have used a lot of editing.
I know. And that's the thing is like you get that. I felt like, yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that's exactly it with Django Unchained. And then the same thing with the Hateful Eight, except much, much more so.
Mhm.
Inglourious Bastards, though, is such a great film. And
That's true. Yeah.
I don't think that it's overlong. So, because I'm looking through it and I'm going, is this because he's starting to do more of a historical film? Or is this because, like, and if so, is it that once he starts going into the 19th century, he's struggling a bit more? Um, because
Yeah, I think
Inglourious
it's
Bastards is
partly
World War
that
II.
I think it's partly that the Western aesthetic that he has such admiration for, that it wouldn't really fit to put that into into World War II, but he can do it with these other films.
I
So
guess. Here's the thing though about westerns that I think Tarantino just it he can't you can't make a Tarantino film but also have these western influences. Okay, if I really like westerns. The thing about westerns though is that you have very laconic characters, unless I'm totally misusing that word, but I'm pretty sure that's the correct word. Because, but basically, they don't say very much. Very stoic men,
yes, right.
and then a Tarantino film is all dialogue. And I'm like,
Yeah,
you can't do both. That like
yeah.
westerns are great because you've got these characters. Like I remember like hearing this about like Clint Eastwood, and he would complain like with like for a fistful of dollars or what's the other one? And I just mentioned it earlier.
The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, right? Then it's like the scripts would be like 8 pages long or 12 pages long for like a 90-minute movie or a 2 hour movie, and he'd go, "There's too much dialogue." Like I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. That's what Clint Eastwood said. He'd be like, "There's too much dialogue. There's 8 pages here. That's too much." And it's like when you watch them, there's very, very little dialogue.
Yeah,
But they're
yeah.
really compelling films because you're trying to get into the character's head, and like when there are these revenge stories, trying to seek justice on the frontier and all of that stuff. And Tarantino cannot shut up, you know?
Yeah.
Like
No,
his
that's true.
dialogue is excellent. It's excellent. It's so great. Like we talk so much
Absolutely.
about how great he is with that. But then if you're trying to take that genre and that aesthetic of westerns. You can't have chatter like boxes who are supposed to be stoic men. That's why the Hateful Eight doesn't work. They're supposed to be stoic. They're supposed to be laconic. They're supposed to shut their traps, and you are the entire time. It's going, this doesn't work. Those would be my notes, Mr. Tarantino. If you want to know my notes on your films, like, you could make a Western, but you got to stop putting all that dialogue in there. Make it the same length, but, cut out all of the dialogue that you've got. And they won't feel long. You're going to think that if you have these like moments where these long stretches where you don't have a lot of back and forth, that it's going to be boring, but it's not. Watch a Western. They're not boring.
Yeah. No, absolutely. That's I think we really touched on something there. That's it's really that's really interesting, because I do think that I mean, we have said, like, his dialogue is excellent. It is fantastic. You have the opening scenes in Reservoir Dogs around, the table after they had lunch or breakfast or whatever it was, in the diner.
Yeah.
Like, that's fantastic. It's an entire scene that is chock full of dialogue.
Oh yeah.
Then you go to to Pulp Fiction, and it's the same thing. You're in a diner, except you're only looking at two characters, but you can't keep up with them. They're just having their own conversation because they know each other so well.
Right.
So then once you start doing more of these characters who don't know each other, and then you're getting them to talk forever to each other, and it's like, well, but that doesn't work. You're trying to do two conflicting things at the same time.
Yeah. But Jackie Brown actually has got moments of quiet.
That's true.
Especially between Jackie Brown and Max Cherry, or whatever his name is, something Cherry. Anyway, Robert Forster, right? Between the character Jackie Brown and that guy. Then, like, you have these moments, but they're not saying that much. Right?
Yeah.
And they're still getting, like, it's fairly quiet. Which would work in these other films. I think that The Hateful Eight could have worked better if you had way, way, way less dialogue. But it's like he's doing this Tarantino back and forth. And so I'm saying, I just don't think it works. I'm like, you've already done this, and we've seen how great this can be, but it's not working here. And I don't think that it works in much of Django Unchained either. That's why I'm saying that it feels self-indulgent. It's that Tarantino wants to put all that stuff in there because he has fun writing that dialogue. And then it's like, okay, it's good, fun Tarantino dialogue, but it doesn't fit this film. So it's not working.
Yeah. Okay, so to finish things off, are you excited about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
I'm going to be, I think, like the only person who likes Tarantino who's going to say no. I think he's made two not very good movies. Like, so is this going to be a departure from the last two? I hope so, because it's 20th century.
Yeah, that's what
it's
I'm
also
thinking
very
too.
Intentionally focusing on Hollywood history, and he obviously has an adoration for Hollywood and its history.
Filmmaking
in general. And that, the trailer looks great. And you've got Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio, and seeing them together, that should be good. I like this whole dynamic of having, the stuntman and the actor. But like I say, he's on a 2-film losing streak as far as I'm concerned. And so, no, I'm not actually. I have a wait and see attitude. If people are like, wow, this is the best Tarantino film since, let's say, Inglourious Bastards, then I'll be like, okay, great. But I was not planning on seeing it in the theater. I don't know. Maybe we could do a review where we go and see it in the theater. I don't know. How about you? Are you excited to see it?
I wouldn't say excited. If we were doing it for the podcast, then I'd go see it in theaters. Otherwise, I'll wait for it to come out on DVD or on Netflix or whatever. I don't have a strong inclination of like, oh yeah, it's another Tarantino film, I gotta go see it. Because the last couple films have kind of left me, being like, okay, yeah. They're
Right.
not bad films, but they're not, oh, I'm super excited for the next one.
Exactly. Yeah,
Uh,
like he's
yeah.
still a very competent film director.
Yeah.
Like he certainly is very, very capable. So it's not like he's making bad movies because I don't think
Right.
that The Hateful Eight is bad. I
Mhm.
just it's part of it is that there's a certain amount of expectation that you have with Tarantino, and like I say, I just don't think that he's making films that he's not telling stories that he should be telling, or at least he's not telling them in a way that I think he should be. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I mean, people can comment below depending on, especially depending on how many like views and like feedback we get. If people are like, you've got to do a review of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Am I getting that right? I can never remember the name of this thing.
Yeah, no, it's very odd because it's Once Upon a Time dot 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 in Hollywood. And when you look at it like written out or whatever, like Once Upon a Time is like pretty small and then it's in Hollywood. I'm like,
Oh,
should
okay.
I just call the film In Hollywood? Like it's such a long
Right.
title. I
Am I
don't
supposed to whisper the first part and shout the second part? How am I supposed to read this
on the
title?
time in Hollywood.
I think you got it. I think that's it. That's how you have to ask for tickets at the theater, too. Two for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
They don't even sell tickets. Like they don't have people selling tickets anymore up here. It's all done at the machines. They have like people standing there to help you with the machines, but
Yeah,
it's all done on the touchscreen, self-serve kiosks.
gotcha. I've been to some theaters like that. The yeah, the one theater here in town. This is just a little aside, and then we'll finish up. But the one theater here in town is amazing. It is such a blast from the past. Like I didn't know that there were any theaters like this still in existence. It's like you go up and it's not quite like the box office outside, which would be great, but still you go up and there's just this little counter, and then you go in and it is just not a very big screen. It's not stadium style seating, and it's, pretty flat. And yeah, it's an old theater, and it's hard to believe that it's still in operation, but it's fun. I like it. Yeah. I've always
Cool.
liked going to theaters like that. So
Yeah, I'll have to we'll have to go there next time I come down
yeah,
there.
for sure. For sure.
All
Yeah.
right.
Okay. Well,
But yeah, this is great. There's so much to talk about
yeah.
with Quentin Tarantino. Obviously, we can't touch on it all. And eventually, I'm sure both of us will see Death Proof. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Death Proof and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
yes,
We can talk about those because we might do a follow-up, another
yeah,
one on Tarantino, because
yeah.
there's lots more to say.
Absolutely.
All right, folks. Well, you can comment below if you've got any thoughts on this. And thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Ignore the bell, people. We're gonna keep going. We're still ignoring it. Don't worry. I I don't know what that. I think that's the fire drill. All right. We're gonna go home. Yeah. All right. We're done.